Hi guys, considering how well the previous 3 top 5 best clicky, linear and tactile switch videos were received, I decided I'd do a special about the top 10 worst keyboard switches of all time, although this time we're looking at clicky, tactile and linear all at the same time. There's even some switches in here that I haven't reviewed yet. All the switches on this list are absolutely atrocious, and I'd advise everyone to steer well clear of these. They're super terror bad, and to be honest, if I could help it, I wouldn't even touch them with your fingers. I should specify that some switches, such as traditional rubber domes, have been disqualified from this list, although some switches on this list do use rubber parts as part of a discrete switch. So there's no PC Junior or Fall 2000 in this list, and neither is the dreaded laser projection keyboard. Thank fuck I don't have to touch any of these again. At number 10 we kick off with Cherry MX Brown. Nah, just kidding, it's Alps Integrated Dome. Although some of the switches were difficult to place at an exact spot on this list, this was one of the easier ones, because this one is only unquestionably ultra unpleasant, whereas numbers 5 through 8 are super severely shit, and the top 4 are horrifyingly hyper hideous. Alps Integrated Domes are discrete switches with a conductive rubber dome inside, but they're way less tactile than rubber domes, feeling almost linear, and they're ultra mushy and have an uncomfortable feeling short travel as well. Just everything about this switch feels off and not nice, and like it should be the opposite of what it actually is, but despite all this, it's really not that bad compared to what's about to come up later. At number 9, we have Copam click and membrane switches, which is one of the ones I haven't shown you yet. This new old stock keyboard has them in, and it's basically a slider with pusher above a set of membranes, and an Alps style click leaf held in a recess in the barrel plate, and an external coil spring for the return force. It's a fucking razor ornata, everyone. They've miserably failed in the design though. The key feels very scratchy, especially near the bottom of the travel, and the tactility of this keyboard is about as consistent as the consistency of my shit. It even binds a bit on off-center key presses, and considering this one is new old stock, that's really not a good sign. I can't even imagine what an incredibly fucking awful spectacle a dirty, well-used one would be. Considering the splattery poop we've seen so far, you'd think we're already scraping the bottom of the ship barrel, but no, we're just getting started. Down the sewers of flaming fuckness we go. At number 8, Tronic foam and foil. Several dozen jaws will have hit some floor or desk somewhere when their owners will have realized this absolute abomination is as low as number 8. But here we are. The vintage linear switches with the tall stems aren't quite as bad, but their later short height ones with the tactile rubber sleeves are just fucking abysmal on every level. The tactility is extremely inconsistent, the weighting is too stiff, the key feel is scratchy beyond belief, and it binds pretty terribly. It's a brilliantly all-round bag of shit. Fuck this thing. Even the fact that it's capacitive can't save it. These things are so bad that they literally rot from the inside. Yeah, great, a switch with an expiration date. Exactly what I wanted for Christmas. Thank you, Santa. Next, at number 7, we have the first truly awful switch I ever reviewed, an old nemesis of mine called Amstrad Spring Over Membrane. I restored several of these boards and later found some that weren't quite rusted to oblivion, but all of them were fucking terrible. This was 80s British cost-saving crap production at its finest. Jesus Morris dancing Christ, Britain made this. It's a linear switch, but it's barely even worthy of the name. I've tried several spring over membrane switches over time, but these are the worst ones I remember. The switches are scratchy as a rash on your arse and about as pleasant. They bind badly, and the weighting is really weird. It doesn't even feel very linear. It feels like it gets way too stiff, way too fast. Just bleh. They sound unbelievably pingy as well, as the keyboard assembly lacks any real build quality to speak of. It's basically just a bunch of loose springs inside a plastic lunchbox, so the whole thing reverberates like the bells of St. Paul's Cathedral. Going down to number 6, we have Futaba ML, also known as Futaba Low Profile Linear. All old Futaba linears have their problems, but the ML series is a short-throw redesign of their simplified switch, which was already gag-inducingly dreadful. These low-profile ones are the full vomit caliber though. Even just thinking about them makes me sick to my stomach. You know that crying thing you do when you puke? Well, that's the way I feel when I use these. The travel is unnaturally short at 2.5mm, and they feel scratchy as well as very stiff. According to some old data sheets, they operate at 100 grams of force. The result of this combination is that the switches feel as if they're actually solid state and shouldn't move, and you're trying to push a solid surface that gives in just a little bit if you mash it enough. Apparently, they're even unreliable, with a specified lifetime of only 3 million cycles for the George Risk clones, well under the standard 50 million you get nowadays. Seriously, what's the fucking point? Next up at number 5, we have Stackpole switches, and presumably also Hi-Tek linears, which they're a shameless clone of, although I don't own those myself. Stackpole switches are often found like this, fixed to a grid like some mechanical twat waffle, and they're a very primitive, rough concept of what would later become NMB Space Invader switches, which were infinitely better. These switches are well known for being extremely stiff, but they're also horrendously scratchy, to the point where every single key is difficult to press, making these switches virtually unusable. They have a distinct, hateful quality to them, as if this cunt puddle of a keyboard genuinely wants to make your life as fucking miserable as possible. And it does a damn fine job of that as well, because using this for any period of time is just a mind-shatteringly gruesome experience from which you'll likely never fully recover. And beyond that, the sliders just more or less automatically break over time, and by that I mean they all just fall apart. So they stop retaining the keycaps, which is, let's be honest, suboptimal. Coming to the top 4, we enter into the realm of the unspeakably evil switches, the ones where use can really only result in permanent mental scarring and loss of faith in humanity. Beware all ye who enter here. Kicking off at number 4, we have one of the easier switches on this list to acquire, Cherry MY. These were Cherry's mid-budget option, cheaper than Cherry MX, which was their premium series. Speaking of which, some people had expected to see Cherry MX on this list, especially MX Sound, but the truth is Cherry MX is far too mediocre to be interesting or entertaining enough to be on here. Cherry MY, however, are the real deal. They're a leaf spring over membrane design with a very small coil spring inside, and they are some seriously petrifyingly awful shit biscuits. The key feel varies widely between specimens, and the vintage black design wasn't even quite as bad, but the modern white slider type is extremely scratchy. This G80-8000 I haven't even shown yet, but which is really not even that dirty, as it's so bad that every single key binds like hell. Truly, even a run-of-the-mill rubber dome feels god-tier classy and sophisticated, compared to this depressingly dire and diabolically disgusting mess of a switch. If there was ever proof that Cherry were a bunch of cum-guzzling jizz muffins who didn't shy away from making the most guttural of gutter trash, this is it. At number 3, getting closer to the inner circles of hell, we have another switch I haven't shown yet, mostly out of fear for having to use it for a week, the MEI switch. This switch is found, to my knowledge, only on the Datalux Space Saver keyboard on their older models, before they upgraded to Cherry ML, another switch I'd rather wipe my shit-stained arse with than use on a keyboard. ML only barely escaped this list, so the fact that this was actually a massive improvement is worrying to say the least. On the Deskthority wiki it's specified as a linear switch, but I genuinely think it might be tactile. You know how Cherry MX Brown are so barely tactile they feel more like scratchy reds? Well, these are the exact opposite. They're so scratchy that they genuinely feel tactile. It's kind of hard to describe, but pretty quickly into the travel, the key feel suddenly gets really stiff and scratchy, almost as if you're trying to force the proverbial golf ball through a garden hose. It's like typing on frozen ice cream, and it leaves you with just as much of a cold and dirty feeling afterwards. Once I've gathered the courage, I'll be doing a review on these at some point, but it'll be a while. I awake at night, screaming at the top of my lungs at the mere thought of having to use this nightmarish, mind-consuming piece of inhuman filth. At the second place we have a switch that's so bad that it's genuinely past the point of functionality. Mitsumi miniature mechanical switches. Shitsumi really opened Pandora's box when they unleashed this unhinged spectre of evil upon the world. The key feel of these is absolute, perfect, crystalline fuckness. When you try out a loose switch, it actually feels really tactile and promising, and then when you try them out in a board, you think someone's pulling your leg and that they swapped out the switches somehow. The mounting somehow makes them so bad that any semblance to usability vanishes like a fart in a poop hurricane. These switches are so horrifyingly atrocious that you could argue that they don't even work. The key here is the binding, which is so bad that if you press any key, even slightly off-center, it just gets stuck as if the sliders are set in superglue. Doing a mistype on these is so common that it begs the question of whether this device actually allows typing to any acceptable degree. What fucking lobotomized thunder cunt tested these out and thought, oh yeah, that's great, let's make that? But believe it or not, it gets worse, because Shitsumi Miniature are not even the worst switch ever made. No, the throne of bad switches, the top place in this list of all that's unspeakably unholy and namelessly evil, the king of cyclopean horrors and all that lurks in the darkness, unable to survive in the light of day, is Smith Corona Leaf Springs. Jesus, Roger me with a wooden spoon, Christ on a merry-go-round singing What Shall We Do with the Drunken Sailor. I can't even begin to describe how infuriatingly atrocious this blasphemous abomination of mankind is. Every single key binds so badly that it couldn't be stiffer and scratchier if you tried to press the key sideways. A rubber dome keyboard is practically divine intervention compared to this eldritch horror from beyond the Stygian abyss. I wouldn't have been surprised if this thing caused the collapse of the mechanical keyboard market. They should bury these in a landfill in New Mexico. Humankind should make a collective effort to track down every single one of these and throw them in an active volcano, erasing every part of their heinous existence. It's so bad that I actually rage quit the typing demonstration as I kept making mistakes and all the keys kept getting stuck. I mean, this thing is not only completely dysfunctional, but it's absolutely exasperating as well. It's the worst switch in history, well beneath even the shittest rubber domes and most embarrassing foam and foil boards. Smith Corona truly have created an antediluvian horror of unimaginable proportions here. That's it for this feast of fantastic fuck nuggets. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and see you in the next video. Coming up next in 3 weeks, by suggestion of a viewer, the weirdest switches ever made. See you next time, guys.